Big Four Tax Delivery Center, TDC, interview preparation. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're covering interview preparation for Big Four tax delivery centers. In simple words, a tax delivery center handles high-volume tax compliance, tax work papers, and global reporting for multiple jurisdictions using standardized processes, automation, and strong review controls. These questions reflect real interview expectations across Big Four TDC teams. Kindly supplement with other Keyring material from channel. Use them for structured preparation. Timestamps are in the description. Let's begin. How do you manage high-volume tax return preparation workflows for multiple jurisdictions in a delivery center model? Sample answer. I start by organizing returns based on deadlines, entity types, and complexity. I break the workload into batches and assign them to the team with clear daily targets. I use workflow tools to track progress and flag delays early. I also build time buffers for reviews so nothing slips close to deadlines. While answering, always include batching, prioritization, and workflow tracking. End. A client sends incomplete tax data. How do you coordinate follow-ups and ensure timely data readiness? Sample answer. I review the data immediately and highlight missing items. Then, I send a clear request list to the client and set a realistic timeline. I follow up politely but consistently until the data arrives. Meanwhile, I prepare whatever sections can be completed so the return moves forward. While answering, always include clear requests, timelines, and proactive follow-ups. How do you validate trial balances and GL extracts before starting tax computations? Sample answer. I check if the trial balance ties to the financial statements. I verify period, entity, and currency. Then I scan accounts for unusual balances or posting errors. I also check mapping to tax categories to avoid downstream issues. Validating upfront prevents rework later. While answering, always include tie-outs, correctness checks, and mapping validation. A team receives conflicting instructions from onshore. How do you clarify expectations and avoid rework? Sample answer. I summarize both versions of the instructions and send a single clarification email. I highlight the differences and ask which approach onshore prefers. Once confirmed, I update the team and the SOP so the confusion does not repeat. While answering, always include summarization, clarification, and documentation. Sir, how do you perform tax adjustments for book-to-tax reconciliation? Sample answer. I start with book income and list permanent and temporary differences. Permanent differences adjust taxable income directly, while temporary differences affect deferred taxes. I calculate each adjustment carefully and document the reasoning. These adjustments flow into the final taxable income. While answering, always include difference types, calculations, and documentation. A company has multiple entities. How do you prepare consolidated tax work papers for group filing? Sample answer. I prepare entity-level work papers first. Then, I combine them into a consolidated schedule, eliminating intercompany transactions and aligning tax adjustments. I ensure uniform mapping and consistent methodology across entities. This gives a clean group-level taxable income. While answering, always include entity-level prep, eliminations, and consistency. How do you identify uncertain tax positions and disclose them appropriately? Sample answer. I review areas with gray interpretations, large estimates, or aggressive positions. I check guidance, court cases, and prior year positions. If uncertainty exists, I evaluate probability and disclosure needs. I document the logic and prepare supporting schedules for onshore review. While answering, always include identification, evaluation, and disclosure support. A client wants accelerated delivery. How do you prioritize tax returns during peak season? Sample answer. I organize returns by statutory deadlines, complexity, and reviewer capacity. Critical returns go first. Routine ones follow. I communicate realistic timelines and avoid overloading the team. Prioritization ensures deadlines are met even when volumes are high. While answering, always include deadline-based prioritization and capacity planning. How do you prepare depreciation schedules using tax depreciation rules versus accounting depreciation? Sample answer. I start with the fixed asset register. Then I apply tax depreciation rules such as useful life, class, or bonus depreciation where applicable. I compare tax depreciation with book depreciation to calculate temporary differences. These differences drive deferred tax entries. While answering, always include asset register, tax rules, and comparison to book. A client's tax return shows large variances year on year. How do you perform variance analysis? Sample answer. I compare current year and prior year numbers line by line. I identify movements in income, expenses, adjustments, or credits. For each major variance, I review underlying transactions or changes in business operations. I document explanations clearly for reviewers. While answering, always include line-by-line comparison and documented explanations. How do you test tax data accuracy through sampling or analytical procedures? Sample answer. I select a sample of transactions and verify them against source documents. I also use analytical procedures, such as ratio checks or reasonableness tests, to identify anomalies. If errors appear, I expand the sample or request additional data. While answering, always include sampling, analytical checks, and follow-up. A team must coordinate with onshore reviewers across time zones. How do you manage communication effectively? Sample answer. I schedule overlap calls for key discussions. I send updates in structured formats so reviewers can respond asynchronously. I make sure queries are grouped and clearly explained. This reduces back and forth and keeps work moving smoothly. While answering, always include structured updates, overlap planning, and clarity. How do you compute deferred tax assets and liabilities and prepare roll-forward schedules? Sample answer. I list all temporary differences and apply the applicable tax rate. Differences that increase future taxable income create deferred tax liabilities, while those that reduce future taxable income create deferred tax assets. I then track beginning balance, current year movement, and ending balance in a roll forward. While answering, always include temporary differences, tax rate, and roll forward logic. A client has international operations. How do you prepare foreign tax credit (FTC) calculations? Sample answer. I gather foreign income, foreign tax paid, and relevant limits. I separate taxes by category and jurisdiction as required by the rules. Then I compute eligible credits, apply limitations, and prepare supporting schedules. This prevents double taxation. While answering, always include income, taxes, and limitation rules. How do you calculate transfer pricing adjustments for tax return purposes? Sample answer. I compare actual intercompany prices to arm's length benchmarks. If the actual number falls outside the acceptable range, I post an adjustment. I document calculations, comparables, and reasoning so reviewers can validate easily. While answering, always include comparables, variance check, and documentation. A client undergoes entity restructuring. How do you evaluate tax filing implications? Sample answer. I understand the type of restructuring, merger, demerger, or conversion. Then I review impacts on tax years, carryforwards, filing obligations, and state filings. I update entity data, prepare transition workpapers, and flag any special disclosures. While answering, always include restructuring type, impact areas, and disclosures. How do you interpret tax instructions correctly from onshore work papers and engagement binders? Sample answer. I read instructions slowly, highlight key points, and summarize them in my own words. If anything seems unclear, I confirm with the reviewer before starting work. I also store clarified instructions in local SOPs for future reference. While answering, always include careful reading, summarization, and verification. A return has multiple open review comments. How do you track and close them efficiently? Sample answer. I categorize comments based on type: data errors, missing support, or calculation issues. Then I address high-impact comments first. I maintain a tracker showing status, owner, and deadline. Updating it regularly keeps the review cycle fast and transparent. While answering, always include categorization, tracking, and clear ownership. How do you validate tax-sensitive accounts, such as provisions, advances, and accrued liabilities? Sample answer. I review account details, compare movements to prior year, and verify supporting documents. I check if balances align with tax rules, such as disallowed items or timing adjustments. Validating these accounts avoids errors in taxable income. While answering, always include support review, tax logic, and reasonableness. A client sends trial balances with mapping errors. How do you correct and validate mapping? Sample answer. I compare the mapped trial balance to standard tax categories. Incorrect mappings show up quickly when balances appear in the wrong bucket. I correct the mapping file, rerun the mapping, and validate again. This ensures tax computations use accurate data. While answering, always include comparison, correction, and revalidation. End. How do you prepare corporate tax returns in a delivery center environment? Sample answer. I start with validated trial balances, apply book-to-tax adjustments, compute taxable income, and enter numbers into the return software. I attach Workpapers for each section and run diagnostics to check for errors. Finally, I send the draft to onshore for review. While answering, always include adjustments, software entry, and diagnostics. A client uses tax automation software. How do you validate system outputs for accuracy? Sample answer. I compare system results to manual calculations for sample entities. I verify inputs, mapping, rates, and logic. If differences appear, I trace them back to configuration issues. Validating the tool ensures reliable tax returns at scale. While answering, always include sample testing, logic validation, and issue tracing. How do you compute estimated tax payments and quarterly advance tax calculations? Sample answer. I project current year taxable income based on year-to-date numbers. Then I apply the tax rate and adjust for credits or prior year carryforwards. I prepare a schedule showing the required installment. This avoids interest or penalties for underpayment. While answering, always include projections, rate application, and installment logic. A discrepancy appears in taxable income versus book income. How do you identify the root cause? Sample answer. I trace the difference through each book-to-tax adjustment. If the numbers still don't match, I review trial balance mapping, prior year carryforwards, and unusual transactions. Step-by-step review usually isolates the issue. While answering, always include tracing, mapping checks, and systematic review. And how do you handle adjustments for disallowed expenses and tax add-backs? Sample answer. I identify expenses that are not deductible under tax rules, such as penalties or non-business expenses. I compute the add-backs and update taxable income. I maintain clear documentation so reviewers understand why each item was disallowed. While answering, always include identification, calculation, and documentation. A client has cross-border payments. How do you compute withholding tax liability? Sample answer. I first identify the nature of payment, such as royalty, fees, or interest. Then I check the relevant tax treaty or local tax law to find the correct withholding rate. I apply the rate to the taxable amount and prepare supporting schedules. I also confirm if any exemptions or gross-up requirements apply. While answering, always include payment type, treaty rate check, and calculation. How do you prepare support for tax provision calculations under ASC740 or Ind AS 12? Sample answer. I gather pre-tax income, permanent adjustments, and temporary differences. Then I compute current tax expense and deferred taxes. I prepare a roll forward showing opening balance, current year movement, and ending balance. I also prepare effective tax rate reconciliation for disclosure. While answering, always include adjustments, deferreds, and roll forward support. End quote. A client operates in multiple states or provinces. How do you prepare state apportionment schedules? Sample answer. I collect data such as sales, payroll, and property by state. I apply each state's apportionment rules to compute the tax base. Then I calculate state tax liabilities and attach the supporting schedules. Accurate apportionment avoids penalties and notices. While answering, always include data collection, rules, and state-by-state calculations. How do you verify the completeness of supporting documents to tax computations? Sample answer. I cross-check required documents against a standard checklist. I verify trial balances, fixed asset registers, depreciation reports, interest schedules, and prior year filings. Missing items are flagged early so the client can share them in time. This avoids delays during review. While answering, always include checklists, completeness checks, and early follow-up. A client uses ERP data dumps. How do you clean, transform, and validate data for tax use? Sample answer. I begin by removing duplicates, correcting formatting issues, and aligning account mappings. Then I validate totals against the trial balance. I also check unusual entries or negative balances. Clean and aligned data makes tax computations accurate. While answering, always include cleaning, mapping, and validation. How do you apply professional skepticism when reviewing client-provided numbers? Sample answer. I compare numbers with prior years, look for unusual patterns, and question unexpected variances. I verify high-risk areas such as related party transactions or large deductions. If anything seems inconsistent, I request backup or clarification. This protects return quality. While answering, always include variance checks, pattern review, and backup requests. End. A return is nearing deadline, but missing inputs. How do you escalate and manage risks? Sample answer. I immediately inform onshore and highlight the specific missing items. I provide a risk note explaining the impact on filing. I request client escalation if required. Meanwhile, I complete all possible sections so we can finalize quickly once inputs arrive. While answering, always include alerting onshore, impact explanation, and partial completion. How do you compute MAT or AMT and carry-forward credits? Sample answer. I calculate book profit or alternative income as per tax rules. Then I apply the MAT or AMT rate and compare it to regular tax liability. Any excess becomes a credit that can be carried forward. I prepare a schedule showing year-wise utilization. While answering, always include comparison logic, credit calculation, and carry-forward tracking. A team identifies potential tax risks. How do you document and communicate them to onshore? Sample answer. I describe the issue clearly, attach supporting evidence, and estimate the potential tax impact. I categorize the risk as high, medium, or low. Then I share a summary with onshore for review and next steps. Good documentation ensures transparency. While answering, always include clear description, impact estimate, and categorization. How do you prepare tax disclosures for financial statements? Sample answer. I gather current tax expense, deferred taxes, effective tax rate reconciliation, and details of temporary differences. I follow the disclosure format required under accounting standards. I ensure numbers tie back to Workpapers. Accurate disclosures support clean financial statements. While answering, always include key components, tie-outs, and compliance. A client undergoes M&A. How do you support tax basis calculations and opening balance adjustments? Sample answer. I review purchase agreements to understand what assets and liabilities transfer. I compute the tax basis of acquired assets, compare it to book basis, and calculate any adjustments. I also support opening balance entries for deferred taxes. This ensures accurate reporting post-deal. While answering, always include purchase review, basis computation, and adjustments. How do you validate transfer pricing documentation inputs for compliance? Sample answer. I check whether intercompany transactions are complete, accurate, and mapped correctly. I verify pricing, margins, and comparables. I also ensure documentation supports the arm's length principle. Any gaps are escalated for correction. While answering, always include completeness, accuracy, and arm's length checks. A tax software shows errors. How do you troubleshoot and correct the computation logic? Sample answer. I identify the exact area where the error occurs, then compare system output to a manual calculation. If logic is incorrect, I review mappings, rates, or configuration settings. I document the issue and involve IT or onshore if needed. Fixing logic ensures reliable returns. While answering, always include pinpointing errors, manual checks, and configuration review. How do you prepare GST or VAT workpapers for indirect tax return support? Sample answer. I gather sales and purchase data, classify transactions correctly, and apply tax rates. I reconcile totals with the general ledger to avoid mismatches. Then, I compute output tax, input tax credits, and net payable. I also prepare supporting schedules for review. While answering, always include classification, reconciliation, and computation. A client opts for tax incentives. How do you assess eligibility and compute benefits? Sample answer. I review incentive rules and match them with client operations. I check revenue, investment, or employment conditions. If the client qualifies, I calculate the benefit and prepare schedules showing how it was derived. Documentation avoids disputes later. While answering, always include eligibility checks, rule matching, and calculation. How do you track status of multiple returns using workflow management tools? Sample answer. I update each return status, review stage, and dependencies in the workflow tool. I use dashboards to view delays or bottlenecks. Automated reminders help teams stay on track. This makes monitoring simple during peak season. While answering, always include status updates, dashboards, and reminders. A client provides large amounts of unstructured data. How do you organize and analyze it for tax outputs? Sample answer. I first structure the data through cleaning, formatting, and categorization. Then I group information into tax-relevant buckets, such as revenue, expenses, or intercompany items. I run reasonableness checks and validate totals. Structured data produces reliable tax computations. While answering, always include structuring, grouping, and validation. End of quote. How do you perform quality checks on tax returns prepared by junior team members? Sample answer. I review tie-outs, adjustments, mapping, and calculations. I verify supporting workpapers and confirm that instructions were followed. I highlight errors with clear explanations so juniors learn and improve. Strong quality checks reduce rework. While answering, always include verification, corrections, and coaching. A client challenges a tax adjustment. How do you prepare supporting work papers for explanation? Sample answer. I gather the rule, calculation, and source data behind the adjustment. I prepare a simple, step-by-step explanation with references. I also attach examples or prior year support if relevant. Clear documentation helps address the client's concerns. While answering, always include evidence, logic, and clarity. How do you comply with data confidentiality and information security protocols in delivery centers? Sample answer. I follow restricted access rules, use secure folders, and avoid saving data locally. I do not email sensitive files without encryption. I lock my screen, maintain clean desk discipline, and follow all firm-wide security policies. Confidentiality is non-negotiable. While answering, always include access control, secure handling, and disciplined behavior. A tax return requires multiple sign-offs. How do you manage review hierarchy and deadlines? Sample answer. I identify all reviewers, preparer review, senior review, and manager review. I plan timelines so each stage gets enough time. I track comments, close them quickly, and send the return upward without delay. Clear planning keeps the hierarchy running smoothly. While answering, always include hierarchy clarity, timeline planning, and tracking. How do you reconcile general ledger tax accounts to tax return work papers? Sample answer. I match GL balances to tax schedules such as provisions, prepaid taxes, or credits. Any difference is traced to adjustments, timing issues, or prior year entries. I document explanations and ensure all reconciliations agree before filing. While answering, always include matching, tracing, and documenting. A client has multiple prior year returns. How do you ensure continuity and carry forward accuracy? Sample answer. I review prior year returns, carry forward schedules, and pending adjustments. I validate opening balances for credits, losses, or depreciation. This continuity check ensures the current year return is accurate and consistent. While answering, always include prior year review, opening balance validation, and continuity. How do you prepare dashboards for onshore teams showing delivery status, blockers, and risks? Sample answer. I design simple dashboards with status indicators, aging buckets, and a list of open issues. I highlight at-risk returns and reasons for delays. Automated refresh helps onshore view real-time status. Dashboards make communication faster. While answering, always include status, blockers, and real-time visibility. How do you present tax work, issues, and recommendations during onshore review calls? Sample answer. I explain work papers clearly, summarize key adjustments, and highlight any issues early. I present numbers with logic, not just outputs. I also offer recommendations or next steps. A structured explanation helps reviewers close the return quickly. While answering, always include clear summaries, logic, and recommendations. Thank you for watching, and if you liked our video, kindly press the like button and leave us a comment. This will help us reach a wider audience. Don't forget to check the playlist for more great learning.